People's image of hang gliding harkens back to the 70s when it was crazy. People were building their own hang gliders and, you know, flying off dunes in sandals and you know, hippies, free spirits. It was a big attraction. I think the image is a mixture of that and then ignorance of what people who are currently flying hang gliders are thinking and doing.
But they don't understand most of the time that you can actually stay up for hours at a time or that you can fly from one place to another. They think that hang gliding is you go up to the top of a mountain, you set up a hang glider, you launch and you fly down to the bottom of a mountain. It's the closest thing that I can think of to bird flight. You set up this hang glider and you take off running, and next thing you know you're flying, and then you land again on your feet like a bird. But on a good soaring day when you do that, before long you're looking down on the spot that you've just taken off from, and to me that's just one of the neatest things.
Missoula and hang gliding are synonymous. Missoula is one of the oldest hang gliding sites, inland hang gliding sites in the world. Not just in the U.S., in the world.
To me, it's a pretty remarkable sight to see a kite flying off a mountain. It's another nice Missoula thing.
There's no place that's like Mount Sentinel where there's a town, a big, you know, vibrant town, and a hill just coming right out of there. There's no place like that.
Those that do understand how long of a rich history it's had in Missoula, they don't know that there's forces at work trying to bring that to an end.
I mean, it can be a dangerous sport. There's no question about that. But we were pretty good at hurting ourselves, so we were worried that, you know, after the 5th or 6th guy, you know, lost his life on Sentinel, that eventually somebody would say, you know. But all the time, yeah, we were worried, and we had the encroachment of the, you know, the university development. We were always in negotiations with somebody, always.
I had that, you know, understanding that it was at risk, but it never seemed like a reality.
I've talked to Bill Johnson a little bit. He was one of the pioneers of flying Sentinel. He would drive up there and fly down, and then he would actually land right in the oval on the campus. I believe that would have been, you know, maybe 73 or something like that.
He had a standard. He actually flew off of Mount Sentinel back when you had to build your own hang glider from the Prince of Francis Regallo. He flew it off Mount Sentinel and survived, not knowing even what he was trying to do, and it was one of his very first attempts at flying ever, and he made it. But Bill was a wild guy. He was probably the epitome of a wild and crazy hang glider pilot. He landed on top of the field house with his Quicksilver because he said it looked like a cool thing to do. That typifies Bill Johnson in every aspect. That's just the way he was. He was a character. Because the people that were flying the mountain early on got up there by sneaking up there. The university probably realized that Well, it's going to happen anyway, so we just as well have our thumb on it a little bit. Mount Sentinel is actually one of the oldest hang gliding clubs in the United States. It was registered with the university back in the early and mid-70s. There were policies set up with the university on what it took to be able to fly Mount Sentinel. We had to have the insurance and all that stuff squared away with them. We had to have a rating system. And it was very stringently taken care of by the people that were then flying the mountain. There were hippies, there were rednecks. We all got along for a common means of the mountain. People that didn't like each other got along because we had a common means, the mountain. We've had one of the most diverse groups that I've ever been involved with in my entire life.
Yeah, 1978 is when I started, so it's almost 30 years, 29 years now. The early days were a little scarier than they are now. The equipment wasn't near what it is today. And we didn't know quite as much as we know today, too. Yeah. Kind of just taught myself how to fly. Took my brother up, where Mansion Heights is right now. We used to call it the S Hill. Took my old Phoenix 6 and set it up real quickly and did some running, and my first flight in that thing, I got 300 feet off the ground and managed to sort of gently crash it into the sage, or not the sagebrush, but into the knapweed that was up there, and called it a day.
There were three of us that grew up in what we call the Kamikaze School of Hang Gliding. We would go up to the top of a mountain and we would look at each other and say, well, I went first last time. And we would ask people, of course, that we knew that flew. And the guy that I bought my glider from said that he'd take me out once, and he did. And we got to the top of the mountain, and actually it was a hill. I was only supposed to glide about 50 yards at the most, and I took off and flew about a quarter of a mile. So that's how I pretty much learned how to hang glide. I never had any formal instruction whatsoever. We were very lucky at the time probably to survive it, but we had youth and lack of fear in our favor. So that worked out real well for us. We were very agile. Plus we were all single and had a little bit of money to deal with buying tubes and down tubes. Gliders were simple to repair back in those days, so we could repair our own gliders quite easily, which we often went out and crashed hang gliders and then spent the week repairing them, and then going out and crashing hang gliders and repairing them.
My first flight off of Sentinel was kind of a little bit of a disaster for me. Came around the corner there, was getting pretty low around the fire line level, and came around towards the M, and I realized I wasn't going to make it to the landing zone, so I found this little hill with a flat area for a bailout, and just kind of calmly, it was weird. I wasn't panicked at all. I just calmly knew which way the wind was coming in, and as soon as I landed, about 40 kids came running out, and so I was surrounded by kids, and then I got my butt chewed when the real hang gliding team came over to find me. Where the heck did this young kid go? And yeah, that was my first flight off of Mount Sentinel, and they've been a lot better ever since.
After I became pretty proficient on my own, I had some close calls, just being too eager, and no instruction there. Definitely, we felt more like pioneers, a lot. With the land around there's no way you could not feel that way. And then I had already flown Sentinel once, and it was a 10-minute flight, just gently floating down to the landing field. I always had launched and then focused in on where I was landing. And I just launched and I went straight up, and it was nice light, and I just did what I normally do, fly over to the landing field, and I gained 2,000 feet in doing that. And I panicked a little bit just because it was so new to me, and I was up so high over town, and I remember looking down, I could hear sirens, and I thought, oh my God, he's called the ambulance for when I finally make it down, or they're going to follow me to wherever I end up. And of course, I eventually enjoyed it a lot and went down and had a perfect landing. It was all fine. And so that was before we had to have reserves, and I had bought a reserve parachute, but I didn't have the container for it. And I did go right home and hand sew that container onto my harness. The early hang gliders had very low performance. The newer ones, they go a lot faster. They go a lot further, and they're foot-launch sailplanes.
As hang gliders progressed and became more efficient, they became more like soaring birds, which have longer wings and narrower from front to back. Efficiency, as far as your glide goes, went way up. They became a lot easier to handle and control.
The beginner gliders are so much friendlier now than they used to be, because they're beginner gliders. The Skyhawks and those they were all right, but they had pretty high stall speeds and not really great landing characteristics. And the Falcons have really changed things for people learning how to fly.
I think I probably taught about, let's see, maybe somewhere between 30 and 50. A lot of people didn't go beyond the training hill. And of the pilots that are, still flying somewhere, there's probably 30 of them that I taught. A lot of good pilots have come out of Missoula that don't live there anymore, and a lot still live there. There's a world-class pilot living in Missoula right now. He's competing, been to Australia and competed with the best in the world in cross-country races. And it's produced a lot of good pilots. I helped a little bit. It's 99.9, dependent upon the pilot. And the equipment we make is all tested and it's all safe. And if you operate it properly, it's really. I've hurt myself skiing and climbing, and I've never hurt myself hang gliding, and now I'm closing 50, and I think I can do it till I'm 70, and I think I can do it safely.
I do try to take the time to explain hang gliding to my non-flying friends and people that who appreciate the neatness and the uniqueness of the sport. You have aerobatics and hang gliding, you have cross-country flying, then just have that nice glass off in which the air is butter smooth, and you can't even sink out on days. It is a fascinating sport. I wish that I could convey it equal to the experience I've had. I'd have the older pilots tell me how it was going to be a different world for me once I started going cross-country. And I thought, well, yeah, but right now I'd be just happy to just soar around for a while and enjoy the view, and just the sensation of flying is phenomenal enough, let alone going cross-country. But pretty soon you get used to that, and you do go on a cross-country flight, which means that you get high enough from the mountain you've launched from, and then you fly downwind, with enough altitude to safely make it to another landing zone. It is very rewarding when you actually take off from a site. You climb over that site, and you fly from that site to another place without an engine.
Where cross-country flying became the thing that everyone wanted to do. You fly in, 30 miles from where you took off, and the things that you have to think about, it's addictive. Just the feeling and the experience. So everybody wants to fly cross-country, and everyone wants to fly the furthest. Hank, the day before, set the site record. And he saw the forecast, dropped what he was doing, and he thought it was going to be a good day to go, and he was spot on. and I had a good flight, a 70-mile flight, and I was so upset. I was so upset, and I can't help it. We were competitive, and I mean, I was happy for him, but the next day was the same, and I was up there, and we followed the path that Hank had gone on the day before, and went the same way. And at one point, we changed directions. It was past Ovando, and I stayed with just a breath of a thermal, and had long glides out all the way, and just cleared the Continental Divide from Missoula, and later was able to make it over to the Continental Divide one more time from Missoula, but that was it. Those were really special days. Good weather, and lots of people trying to fly. Yeah, and it meant so much more because it was Sentinel. I mean, there's Alberton, there's other sites nearby, but that's the one.
It's really not that dangerous. It is risky, of course, as any extreme sport is, but it's a high risk, high reward type of sport. There's been times that I've been at in excess of 12,000 feet, and I've looked off of my wing and I saw a golden eagle circling with me one day, and he stayed with me while I was climbing up to cloud base for another 1,000 feet. And you don't forget things like that. That's the high reward aspect of hang gliding that is just fascinating.
Most people don't know that you can, fly up to, follow a thermal up to 18,000 feet and find the next one 50 miles away, and people flying them now have a level that approaches the sailplane pilot's knowledge of, and in many cases more, because lots of pilots that don't fly really slow flying aircraft don't understand micrometeorology the way that we do, because we live it, and so that adds some complexity that I think even really intelligent, open-minded people have a tough time seeing it.
When you're flying a hang glider, you always have to remember that that's exactly what you're doing. You're only flying the hang glider, and everything that you do is focused on what you're doing at the time. When you're flying, it is an entirely consuming sport. You have to be absolutely 100% into it. You can't be thinking about what's going on at home. You can't be thinking about going to school, grades. You can't be thinking about anything. That's the only thing that you can have in your mind at that time. That's why, for me, it's the greatest escape. The minute my feet leave the ground, I don't think of anything but what I'm doing, and that's flying. I leave everything else behind.
Sentinel is such a political nightmare just because, you go through Forest Service land to get there, you cross state land to get there to university land, and there's, 3 different entities that you're dealing with there. Sooner or later something's going to fall apart.
I knew the guys were flying on Sentinel. When I came back into town on the interstate, I noticed one of the regional jets coming in from over the top of Sentinel, and thinking to myself, boy, I hope Carl remembered to call the tower.
I'd been flying around in substantial amount of wind for a while, because I think that's why I forgot to call the towers, because there was so much wind. I didn't really think I was going to fly, and by the time I got around to flying, I'd forgotten, and then I was flying around, and I was at about 7,000 feet, and I looked back and I saw a plane coming, and all of a sudden the plane turned, and why it took evasive maneuvers, I'm not really positive.
This small air carrier actually reported Carl in the air, and supposedly he had to take evasive action to avoid him, and
It was, 300 to 500 feet below me and slightly north of me. There wasn't a chance in hell it was actually going to hit me.
There were alarms going off in the cockpit. I think it was most likely a ground proximity warning. Alarm was going off while the pilot was transmitting to the tower and reporting a hang glider.
It was basically the beginning of all our travails with Henry, the tower chief.
So that was an incident that the tower didn't really need to hear about.
I've had planes come closer to me than that, when we called the tower.
And then within a couple weeks after that, some of the guys flew into town from Alberton, and one of them landed within the air traffic control area close to the airport. And was reported by another airplane, and that was not a good deal.
I remember seeing Bill fly through that Class D airspace. I knew that he was definitely too close to the tower. It seems that they were probably overreacting when they called the helicopter in and all the police and everything for a guy landing in a piece of private ground that I don't believe the people who own the ground called. I think that the control tower was looking for excuses already to shut down Mount Sentinel, so anything that's hang gliding related would be put in that pile, if you will.
So it was basically a bad season for us, and we're trying to work our way out of it.
Before we knew it, our locks were pulled and we couldn't fly Sentinel anymore. Flying just outside of the Class D airspace. Everybody knows flights come in over Mount Sentinel, and we're flying there, so it's something we pay attention to. And my understanding is the new tower chief was pretty crafty about how to approach the situation, knowing that he was kind of out of his jurisdiction. He decided to put the paranoia into the university's head as well as the Forest Service, the two organizations that pretty much have complete control of our flying site. So that was pretty much my understanding of how we got shut down.
He tried to close non-controlled airspace because he felt like it. He is probably out of bounds. He's acting like he's God. He's not a god. Not by a long shot.
There's a long history of hang gliding relatively close to airports and no collisions. Albuquerque Crestline is very close to LAX and kind of on their approach path. Sacramento, Santa Barbara, Boise, I believe, has a couple. I think it's pretty widespread. Yeah, we've been flying here for 35 years and have no collisions.
There's got to be something that works in those spaces that doesn't appear to be working in this space. And so, it's never enough to say, well, this happens elsewhere. What else happens with that to make it work? So, and those are the pieces that are missing, and there's got to be some middle ground here.
Every flying site in the country has had to change, adapt to the times, and modify their behavior, and hopefully get some concessions from the from the locals, because the activity, it's valuable to people who don't participate. If you think of like the Mission Mountain Wilderness, how many people make use of that? It's probably a small number, but how many people think about it? How many people think that Missoula is a great place because of the potential? And there's nobody that can look at a hang glider flying and not have some part of them think, and you can do it. It's one of those things that's out there on the edges, but you can do it, and that's important to everyone.
In the early days of hang gliding, we were a bunch of college students. We were a bunch of young kids. Now we're a bunch of people with financial means. And I, for one personally, would not be at all against forking over money for a lawyer to pursue this. If he wants to cause a problem for hang gliding, what comes around goes around. We'd like to deal with him straight up. He's trying to shut down one of the oldest hang gliding sites in the world, inland, and he doesn't have any idea of the tradition, of the lifestyle, of anything.
You know, I generally think that when smart people put their egos aside, they can get stuff done. Seems to me there ought to be a way to make this work. I just hope folks can kind of ratchet it down a little bit and be serious about finding some compromise. I'd love to continue to see kites up there as long as it's safe for everybody. Because I ain't ever gonna do it, so I gotta watch it.
We tried to regulate it, make sure that people were qualified, and in spite of that, we had some accidents, so we were worried about that. You know, there's the spirit of the West that people can do stuff like that, and we did. We became more professional, and we had less. There were less renegades, I guess you'd call them, because in a lot of free spirits are drawn to the sport, and back in the 80s, there were still people who would go up without being qualified because they wanted to fly, and they'd get in trouble. So yeah, we always had to negotiate with somebody. That for non-participants, there is still value in the activity of hang gliding. I mean, somehow we have to get that across, because it's one of the things that makes Missoula a special place. It's part of it. It's there. I mean, it's in the posters in the university. Everyone sees them flying, and everyone gets to have that place in their mind where they could hang glide if they wanted to. And even if you don't ever do it, it's nice to know it's there. The feel of flying in your own town, where we fly here, is a beautiful site. It's really well organized, but it's off. It's away from everything. It's not connected to any town like Mount Sentinel is to Missoula. And there's no place that I've ever been. I've flown in Europe and South America, and all across the West, everywhere, and the East Coast as well. And there's no place where people in the town learn to fly from the people who are flying right on the hill, right into town. That's what makes it special, the connection to the town. When I was the dealer for Willswing in Missoula, they would send up demo tours, and these guys who had flown everywhere around the world would come up there, and they just were amazed at how beautiful it was, and they just told us how lucky we had it, and we are to have that. But when you're there on a good day, it's the best place in the world.
Why do I hang glide? No, it's kind of emotional, because I can't look up and not want to fly. Without hang gliding, I don't know what there would be. This is stupid. You're gonna edit this part, right?
Sitting in the basement, I'll wait for the phone to ring. I'm up and down, doing the same damn thing. I'm thinking about this and I'm worried about that. I can't tell where my head is, I don't know where my head is at. Well, I tried to talk to my woman, she said she she ain't going there. So we've been down that road before, ain't just gone nowhere. Now I got my own problems, this ain't the time or place. Stick your worries somewhere else, get yourself out of my face. Well, I can't take my head, 'cause it's so dark in here, and I can't see nothing, no, nothing's really clear. Well, the only thing that I can do, I don't want this no more. It's time to turn it all around, turn it all around, that's for sure. Well, all of this rejection's driving me insane. I need someone to talk to, someone to explain how I'm gonna get out of this rut, back on the right track. Feel like I'm losing it, like I got some monkey on my back. Well, keep tilting my head, 'cause it's so dark here, and I can't see nothing, no, nothing's really clear. Well, the only thing that I can do, I don't want this no more. It's time to turn it all around, turn it all